Presidential pardons, federal crimes only. What a president can and cannot pardon. This is the first video in a three-part series, one on presidential pardons, one on state pardons, and one on parole. A president can legally pardon almost anyone. If pardons require no explanation, enforcement requires no accountability, how are victims supposed to trust the system? No confirmation of ICE hiring. Congressional questions remain about vetting after pardons. Transparency is the concern. With one signature, accountability can vanish without notice, without warning, and or without a single word to the people who were harmed, like me, like you. Before we talk about pardons, victims need to understand one thing clearly. A pardon is not justice. It's not finding of innocence, and it does not mean that crime never happened. In my opinion, it is favoritism and loyalty. In 2025, roughly 1,500 people convicted of crimes related to the January 6th Capitol insurrection were pardoned en masse. Yet, at least 33 of them have since been charged with new serious crimes causing harm and death. This shows how wide-scale pardon power can affect public safety. Where are they now? Are they our neighbors? Who will they hurt next? What oversight exists once a conviction is erased? Are communities informed when people with valid histories are released without supervision? A presidential pardon forgives a federal crime, but it does not erase the record. Those court documents still exist. With a single signature, a president can pardon hundreds of offenders without consulting victims and without weighing how dangerous those individuals may be. This is not a failure of the law. It is how the law is written in the Constitution. But I truly believe that in 1776, the idea that a president could release known dangerous felons was never considered by my grandfathers while fighting for freedom in 1776. When people are released without probation or oversight, victims don't feel safe. We feel exposed. The system may move on, but victims are left carrying not only the loss of a loved one, but the ongoing fear that they or their families are no longer protected. And it isn't only the victims. Witnesses and jurors are affected too. People who participated in the justice process and now live with uncertainty once a convicted offender is released without supervision. Accountability ends, but continued risk to victims does not. For those of us living, this is reality. It raises hard questions. If offenders are notified, represented, and protected at every step, why are victims notified when their safety may be at risk? Why are victims ignored and punished again and again? My name is Sarah Rainey. My son Kenley was killed by a repeat offender who will be up for parole in December 2026. After he died, I learned something that victims are never taught. The justice system does not treat everyone the same, especially when political power, favoritism, loyalty, and money are involved. U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 states, "The President shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment." It does not say a judge must approve, a jury must agree, victims must be notified, victims must be heard, reasons must be given. That's why a presidential pardon can be issued with a single signature and without notifying the victims. This is my opinion again. The criminal has all the rights and the victims must fight to be heard. This is legal. This is our Constitution. What it does not say, no judge, no jury, no victim's notice, no explanation required. It's not written into the Constitution. It is not required. Victims' rights laws came later. They do not override this power. That's why victims are often left out. Our right to ask questions. The Constitution's First Amendment. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Redress is what the victims seek when justice fails. Recognition of harm, accountability, and meaningful steps to repair what can be repaired. This means victims and citizens have the right to ask questions, speak out, question powerful decisions, demand answers. Asking why victims weren't told is protected speech. Questions are not accusations. This is illegal. Because of this power, a president can legally pardon friends, political allies, family members, in-laws, people convicted of serious federal crimes. It does not matter how many people were hurt or killed, how severe the crime was, how victims feel for their safety. If a crime is federal, the pardon is legal. There are only 3 limits a president cannot pardon: impeachment, state crimes, civil lawsuits. That's it. Why this hits victims hard. When a president issues a pardon, victims are not warned. Victims are not notified. Victims are not asked why. For victims of violent crime, this isn't just painful. These are people who cause serious harm and show little regard for the damage they left behind. When punishment is erased without warning, victims are left asking whether accountability still exists at all. I know I do, all the time. Fear grows when people harmed by crime are excluded from decisions that affect their safety. In my opinion, this is not fair, but is the law. Victims' rights laws were created to prevent surprise releases and give victims notice and a voice. But when it comes to presidential pardons, those laws often do not apply, because the Constitution gives the president broad, independent pardon power for federal crimes. As a result, victims' rights cannot override it, and a single signature can legally end a sentence or a conviction without involving victims at all. For victims, this often feels like being erased now that their safety and trauma matter most. That is not a loophole. It is how the Constitution is written. Mass pardons in recent history. A president used his power to grant clemency to a large group of people convicted of federal crimes connected to January 6th. This action was legal. This video is not accusing anyone of wrongdoing, but victims and citizens are allowed to ask questions. That's protected speech. U.S. Constitution, First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This means victims and citizens have the right to speak out, ask questions, question government decisions, petition the government for answers. Asking why our rights were ignored is protected speech. Talking about how the system treated us is protected speech. Saying we had to fight for our rights is protected speech. The truth victims feel. Victims don't experience this as law. We experience it as shock, fear, being erased, being told our pain and loss doesn't count, that criminals' lives are more valuable. The system didn't break. It worked exactly as written, and victims pay the price. Power doesn't have to break the law to cause harm. It only must ignore the people who live with the consequences. If this made your stomach drop, you're not imagining it. This is legal, and this is what it does to victims. These are very different outcomes with real consequences. A pardon forgives a crime. Expungement erases a record. Sealing hides it from public view. When a pardon is granted, the history still exists, but accountability often ends. For victims, that can feel like the system chose closure for the offender while leaving the harm, like me and you, fully intact. This channel exists to document what actually happens after the signature, not what we're told should happen. and not what victims are expected to quietly accept. If you're a victim, subscribe so this information isn't buried. If this reflects what you've lived, share it so others aren't blindsided. And if you've been through this, leave a comment. Your experience helps others understand what else is coming. Because knowing the difference isn't about punishment, it's about truth. And victims deserve to have it. This channel exists to document the truth, connect victims, and ensure no one has to learn these realities alone. Comment and tell us your experiences. Thank you.